Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, the Minister talked about steadily reducing inconsistencies and anomalies. The only anomaly that they're reducing in this bill is the car park tax, which they stripped out of it, Mr Speaker. Talk about inconsistencies. Under that Minister's plan, if a car park was in the CBD of Auckland or Wellington and you used it, you paid fringe benefit tax on it outside work hours. Now, if it happened to be 2 blocks over in the CBD fringe, it didn't apply. If you were in the CBD of Christchurch or Dunedin, it didn't apply. Well, it wouldn't apply in Christchurch because there is no CBD. And if you're in Tauranga or Hamilton, it wouldn't apply, but if you're in Auckland and Wellington, it would. This government is busy creating inconsistencies, Mr Speaker. So under pressure from a very interesting coalition of unions, business groups and Matthew Hooton, the government rolled over and stripped, not before time, the ridiculous car park tax out of this bill. Ridiculous because it was going to cost more in compliance costs than it raised in revenue. By some independent accounting estimates, more than twice as much in compliance costs. So it's typical, Mr Speaker. They say that they are the party of low compliance costs, but they are busy introducing ridiculous taxes that raise them on ordinary New Zealand businesses and workers. They say that they are the party of prudent fiscal management, but actually they have the worst economic record in how many years, Dr. Clark? 50 years. They've never run a fiscal surplus since taking office, this government. The last Labor government never ran a fiscal deficit. But they would have the country believe that they somehow have had a change of heart and they are now managing the economy. Well, sir, in this bill, we no longer have a car park tax. We need the government to wake up and smell the coffee on several other ridiculous petty taxes. The iPad tax, the idea that people, the public New Zealand, would be charged for the personal use of their cell phones and iPads and other devices. Imagine having to go through your phone bill, Mr Speaker, and work out which were the private calls, which were the work calls, apportion them for tax purposes, and then somehow, if you mention both in the same call, share the cost. What would be the compliance costs of that? But the government's happy to tax the public on their private use of cell phones. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because now they want the GCSB to listen in as well on every cell phone call you make. I wonder if they're going to tax us for that privilege as well, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, they haven't, however, got the foresight or the ingenuity to ensure that the people that make cell phones and iPads are paying their fair share of tax. Mr Speaker, the base erosion problem looms large, and the Minister's too busy chit-chatting in the House to do anything about it. Mr Speaker, 2 other examples of this government's ridiculous petty tax drive is the bizarre proposal to tax clergy housing. Now, we all know that clergy don't earn much money. They don't get full salaries, they just get stipends. Part of the way that's offset is that many clergy get a free house to live in, a vicarage or a manse or some such. The government thinks that should be taxed at an imputed full cost, and the poor clergy or the poor church is going to have to find cash that they don't have to pay the grossed up cost of this clergy tax. I want the Minister to stand up and tell the House he's going to fix that anomaly and that inconsistency, because it's not before time. Mr Speaker, accommodation fringe benefit tax is another thing the government's pushing. The idea is that if you're in temporary accommodation for more than a year, sir, and that includes in Christchurch, then that would be classed as a personal benefit and you pay fringe benefit tax on it. Isn't that ridiculous, sir? The government is going to be charging workers who move to Christchurch and have to stay in temporary lodgings for the rebuild fringe benefit tax on their lodgings as if it were a private benefit. What a misbegotten, ridiculous impediment to the rebuild of Christchurch. and I sincerely hope that the next Mayor of Christchurch, the Honourable Leanne Dalzell, works with the government to remove that ridiculous petty tax. Mr. Speaker, this bill does a couple of useful things. We agree with the government on the fact that we should be charging people's private use of batches and boats and cars appropriately, and if it's a business expense for a certain part of the year, the tax implications ought to be proportionate. There's no argument about that. We also agree that the livestock taxation rules the valuation rules should be adjusted to prevent turning what should be profit-earning farming businesses simply into capital gains plays because of the absence of a proper capital gains tax. This bill doesn't go that far, but it at least tightens some of the egregious loopholes around livestock valuation. I do want to acknowledge David Bennett MP, who brought some of his former professional training to bear on the drafting of that part of the bill. Good to see the poacher becoming a gamekeeper. I wish that applied to all his colleagues, Mr. Speaker. And in the background of this bill, sir, is the issue that the public of New Zealand is sick and tired of waiting for this government to show some leadership and a real economic plan. The public is tired of hearing excuses for why the New Zealand economy can't get out of the rut, of why we have to put up with some of the highest unemployment in the developed world, whereas previously under the Labour-led government we had the absolute lowest in the developed world. Mr. Speaker, whether it's the global financial crisis or the Christchurch earthquakes, this government is fast running out of excuses, and at a time when decisive leadership and decisive action and real vision is required, this government is tooling around with petty, ridiculous taxes on car parks, on iPads, on clergy housing, on Christchurch accommodation and the like, putting up compliance costs, putting up costs on ordinary New Zealanders, and, sir, making it more difficult, not easier, for people to get ahead. Mr. Speaker, an aspect which this bill starts to touch on is the erosion of the tax base, and it makes small but useful progress on closing down a couple of loopholes. But in the meantime, sir, in the background, there is massive avoidance going on through the use of company structures, through the use of trusts, and the sad fact is that more than half, sir, of the 100 wealthiest New Zealanders are not even declaring tax on the top tax rate. Let's say that again. Half of the 100 wealthiest New Zealanders, these are multi-millionaires, sir, if not billionaires, are declaring that they are not even on the top tax rate. That they are declaring incomes, therefore, less than 70, and the Minister of Revenue is so ashamed that he has crossed the floor and will now be sitting on the Labour benches, helping to bring down this government, and he wants to take the next call on behalf. I yield my time, sir, to the new member on the Labour. Well, I suppose we've got certain constitutional processes, Todd, so you can lodge your nomination at www.labour.org.nz. I want to be a candidate because I'm jumping off the sinking rat-infested ship called National, and I'm coming to work with the Labour Party to make New Zealand a better and brighter place. And we recognise that member's foresight because it's really a death wish to stay on that side of the House, Mr. Speaker, because here is the most important economic legislation of the day that the government's put up right up the flagpole. Very, very limited tightening of loopholes around batches and boats, good as far as it goes. We'll be supporting that. And in the background, these two 800-pound gorillas, the fact that it's full of petty taxes, putting up compliance costs on New Zealanders, and because they don't have a vision for getting our economy out of the rut. Mr. Speaker, you can tell a lot in Parliament by the way members are sitting. And colleagues, when you look across the floor and you see those members looking at their feet, shuffling their papers out of embarrassment, sir, that this is the best that their ministry can do in trying to modernise the tax system, you know that that's a government that's not long for this world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call John Hayes.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm not sure